So call to the budget committee to order, noting that Mark Hetzel will be several minutes late, but he'll be attending. All of the board members are here. We need to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any public comments? I didn't see any public comments. So let's move right to the budget update. Steve, would you like to take over?
Sure. So the first agenda item is 23-24, a budget update. For the next agenda item, which is the budget changes, Allie's going to talk about the changes that were entered into our Skyward financial system, and she'll review the attachment that's provided. For the first agenda item, it's a projected end of the year balance. There's a couple of topics just to have for the budget committee to have on your radar. The first one is the Fund 73 Employee Benefit Trust Fund payment. Allie and I are going to add this topic to the July budget committee meeting agenda. So just know in recent years, the budget committee has made that decision towards the end of the budget process about whether we're going to make a contribution into Fund 73 or not. We've been holding off on that payment until the end of the year. So just be aware that we're going to bring that back next month. We are projecting now a slightly negative balance. Allie will talk about that with a couple of budget changes. The slightly negative balance is really due to two line items. The big one is transportation. We've talked about our fuel clause in the past, which is $2.50 per gallon of diesel. And it's been running well north of $3.50 pretty much all year long. Of course, we were hoping at some point fuel costs would come down, but they've just held steady all year. So we, at some point, either have to make the decision to start budgeting for higher fuel costs, or just realize that we just don't have enough in the transportation budget to cover the diesel fuel expense the way it is today. And the second one is related to the consulting contracts that were approved this year. As the board members know, we had a variety of consulting contracts that ranged from superintendent search to school perceptions community survey to traffic study for the schools to Mark Roffer's long range planning. We just accomplished a lot this year, and the timing of the new schools and the referendums and the superintendent search all kind of collided in 1 year. Which resulted in the consulting budget being higher than what we typically see. There are savings as well. As we've shared with the committee, the board has not approved any expenditures out of contingency. So that's $100,000 line item that we're, as of right now, are not going to be spending. So there's pockets of savings through our budget as well. But Allie's going to make you aware of the next agenda item of the line items that have changed. But just note, we're going to bring back the Fund 73 topic to next month. And with the fuel costs for transportation, the consultant costs, we're trending slightly negative. We certainly hope that there's savings in other areas like contingency, et cetera, to kind of bring that back to zero. But I'm going to turn it over to Allie to cover the budget changes and what's in the board packet. Allie?
Before you go there.
Oh, yep.
So, with the fuel costs, is there any way for us to lock in going forward like we're doing for our heating costs?
That's a good question.
So that maybe we're less impacted in the future.
So Allie and I have been talking to people about that. One of the people that we were picking their brain on is Jim, who's got a lot of experience in just the area of utility expenditures and just how businesses are handling that. We think there is the possibility to do that, and so that's something that Ally and I are gonna look into. Basically, all of the buses fuel up at Mefferts. So we can open up that dialogue with them or others as to the possibility of exploring basically what we did with natural gas. So we do want to look into that because it just appears like the prices for diesel are just sticking at above $3.50 price at this point.
Okay, and then will we have holdover funds that will help us watch that? I mean, that in the big picture, that's not a crazy number, but it's a big number. And so do we have money that might lessen that impact?
Yeah, I mean, one of them is like the contingency budget that hasn't been spent. So that's about $100,000. And then as we move towards the end of the year, there's other budgets that are nowhere near the level they were before, like legal is a good example. Like the legal costs are way down compared to what they were in the past. Most of our legal issues this year have been covered by insurance. So that's an example where compared to what we spent the previous years, I mean, it's down, what, 75% at least from prior years. So there's pockets of savings throughout various line items that we hope will continue to remain savings through June 30th. We didn't account for that, so we're just showing you the expenditures that are increasing, but Ally and I did not go through and say, all right, contingency won't be spent, legal is less than last year, that kind of stuff. So we are hoping that that can offset the two that are higher.
And then I guess going forward, do we need to do a better job of envisioning the need for extra studies? I mean, the list you gave, all of a sudden, when you do one, you don't really think of it. Oh, yeah, we didn't budget for what we can do. That's not our money. And all of a sudden, we're at potentially $100,000 from consulting fees. And is that something we need to, on our end, do a better job? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, basically what Mark is saying is like balancing them out. And I would say in the 20+ years I've been here, this has just been an unusual year to combine like a superintendent search which almost never happens here, with a traffic study, which is related to the new school opening up. And we haven't done that in over 20 years. And so there just were some expenditures related to, one-time type occurrences that just happened to be during the same year. Typically, we have very easily balanced out the consulting budget between maybe 3 or 4 things that were going on in the year. This year just happened to be some larger ones that all fell in the same year.
I guess the other thing, related to, fuel costs, our bus contract is coming up, in a couple of years.
Yep.
Next year. This is more long term. Can you look at, electric buses?
Yep.
Yeah, and that would probably, obviously, the bus cost is going to be higher, but maybe you could, balance out the fuel cost.
Yeah, that's a great point. Ally and I were talking about the fact that we are positioned well for a full RFP moving forward, and we probably would recommend just moving away from the fuel clause completely and just going out to market with a different approach. And one of those approaches could be electric buses. The other one could be the district not sharing in the cost. With us sharing in the cost of the current fuel cost, it provides a disincentive to actually invest in electric, technology for school buses. So I think it makes sense for us to actually take a different approach with the next RFP and just not even have a fuel clause. So thanks for the discussion. I'm going to turn it over to Ally to just walk through the formal document and what's really all in there.
Sure. So every June, we bring the budget changes to the committee and then the full board for approval. The DPI required formal budget change process document is attached. As Steve mentioned, there really was the two things that made our deficit for $338,000, and that was the consulting and the transportation budget. All of the other changes that were made are listed there in the agenda, but those were pretty minor in comparison to what those two line items did to the budget. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, but otherwise we would look for approval of this to take to the full board in June.
Any questions? Do we have a motion to approve?
Second,
All in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Next item.
So every year, we are required to bring a list of fund balance accounts to the school board in June. The auditors ask for this because then they know what accounts the school board has approved for Ally and I to use during the audit process. We've attached the accounts that we're currently using. We do not have any recommended changes. This is more of, I would describe it as an accounting formality. We would certainly let you know if there was anything, new that we're recommending, but basically it's the same, set of accounts that the board has seen in the past. We're just required to get board documentation in June so that as the audit takes place in the summer, they know the board has approved us using these set of accounts.
Any comments, discussion?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Next item?
For 24-25 budget planning, at this point in the year, we have the second draft of the budget ready. The second draft of the budget really included just a few minor changes compared to the first draft. It included the 3 FTE that were approved at the May board meeting, which was the 2 special ed positions and the 1 EL teacher. We also changed the building and department revenue accounts and then also their expense accounts. So all that budget entry was done. And then we also updated Fund 21. Everything else remained the same from the first draft. The third draft in July will have updates to Fund 80, and then if we get any grant allocations, we'll update those as well. But otherwise, the second draft of the budget is done. And if there's any questions.
Yeah, Rebecca, could you open it up, please? And go to page 9. Yeah, so on the revenues, I guess I was surprised to see the elementary schools drop. And those are pretty big numbers dropping. What's that about?
Sometimes they do less field trips or they change different things that they're doing and that affects their revenues. I mean, I could ask the school
Okay.
why they
And
changed.
with Title I, that was a 37% drop. Is it, we haven't topped that yet, or?
I think that was the estimate. We won't know the number till this fall for sure, but that goes on based on eligibility in every school.
Okay. Thank you.
And Mark, the one thing just to note about the building revenues, when the building revenues go down, the building expenses go down, so they work together.
Okay.
So like as an example, if a field trip is not taking place and their field trip revenues go down 1,000,
Okay.
their building expenses will then get adjusted by 1,000. So it's not affecting really the bottom line. It's more of a building based decision. Other examples are like if they're going to do a building t-shirt for the year, if they're going to do just a variety of different revenues, then they really go hand in hand. the revenue budget goes up or down, the expense budget goes up or down based on what they're doing, but it doesn't affect the bottom line. for the
That
district.
doesn't affect the per pupil.
No, the per pupil stays the same and it doesn't really affect anything on our bottom line.
No,
So Ally just sets it up for them to go in and put in what they think they are gonna do. And then Ally will go in and adjust the expenses accordingly.
all right. Thank you.
Any other comments or discussion? Need to vote?
We would look for a motion to move that forward, please.
We have a motion.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve. Sorry, go ahead.
Second.
By Mark, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Keep moving.
So once a year in June, we do ask the board to approve the lease agreements that we have in place. You'll notice there's one fewer one this year, so the one that isn't in front of you is the Dane County social worker. So the Dane County social worker has historically worked out of Heritage, but is moving to work out of her home instead. And so you don't see the $75 per month lease from Dane County anymore, so that's expiring. The Wisconsin Youth Company is in all three of the elementary schools. We do increase that by an inflationary amount every year. In the new teacher center, we have worked through where they can be. In the new teacher center is gonna share one office space out here, while Waunakee Community Cares Coalition is gonna be housed in the high school. And the Building Bridges program is gonna be housed at Prairie. So we've found a home for all of the partners that we work with who have been at Heritage. And so even though it's blank on here for new teacher center, we've just been working through that. And as of right now, we would have room for them, but only them out here.
There's an extra zero on the 2,900.
Oh.
So that's from 2,850 to 2,900.
So there's a office out here, or they're building another office for the new teacher.
So we're not building another office for them. As we have assigned all of the spaces out here. There is one space that is available for them at least for 24-25. We've not committed beyond that year, but basically, because of the board decision at the last month's board meeting to go with the 614, which means Scott and Danette's area will be built out. Then there's one office remaining in the group of 4, which they would have to share.
Any other comments or
Motion to approve all the leases.
do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
So this agenda item is one that has been brought forward by a couple of board members who wanted to know a little bit more about this concept. So the concept is of a topic of free admission into high school events, and you see in parentheses that we say non-WIAA events because the district doesn't have the ability to control what happens for like playoff games. So Ally's been working with Nick Conrad to put together a financial estimate of what that would look like. We do mention in the notes that several board members have expressed an interest in discussing this topic. So we did attach the memo from Nick. I know Randy's had conversations about this as well with some board members. So Rebecca, would you mind opening that up for just a moment? So you can see at the top, Nick had an overall financial estimate of $43,250. And then he added some notes just for things to be thinking about related to this topic. He also added some potential challenges at the bottom just for awareness regarding, a change of that nature. I think the most significant concern that's coming forward from like the high school administration is not necessarily high school students. It's related to K-8 and the ability to really properly supervise K-8 students. If this potentially would be expanded to like all students, K-12. The concern is not having enough supervisors at events to really be able to supervise all the K-8 kids who potentially would be dropped off, assuming that all of the events are free. I think it's fair to say, if we move forward with this, I think the preference of the high school admin would be to focus on high school students being able to get in for free, because you can see under the concern area, you know, there's mention about supervision about students below 8th grade. I don't really need, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, the only other part is from a fiscal standpoint, you look at, if you go all the way to the top, Rebecca, I think you wrote the impact is like $43,000. And one of the concepts we had was, well, could you pay for it just by adding $5 to everybody's like registration? Well, that's not gonna equal 42 grand. So there would, if this were something you'd wanna kind of move it forward with, then I think we have to realize that there's not the dollars. You're not gonna make up those funds elsewhere within like a reasonable amount adding to fees. And I think that's the point that Steve has added is probably the concern from the high school. That's the challenge with kind of, I think, I like the concept. I think the implementation probably needs more discussion in order to figure out, is this the best route to go? And is this something we can manage?
And so that number includes football. I mean, all the money revenue sports that sell tickets.
Ally, that's all the sports, that's all the kids who pay for passes and games that are, yes, for all of our sports that have a ticketed entrance.
I think the challenge that I've got, you know, with the strategies, we're using that funding to pay for the carpet on the football field, on the you know, soccer field. And if we give up this revenue here, you know, how do we pay for those replacement costs? Which is going to be a big number. So, you know, I would, and given, you know, the challenge that are presented, I would not be in favor of doing this. And football stadium is always full. You know, if you look at it, you know, we put a competitive product on the court, and you know, I think we're getting some good turnout. You know, for these activities.
So, a couple questions. One, students with free and reduced lunch get in.
They already do.
Okay, what about their parents? Are they allowed admission in, or do they have to pay?
I don't think there's a provision where we let like parents in whose kids are.
Okay.
But I think the kids.
It's just a thought in terms of if we're going to include K-8 students and you want the parents there and that sort of thing.
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah, but I also don't think right now, Mark, we have a system to give K-8 students a pass. The high school, they get the season pass if they're on free and reduced lunch, but I don't think we go below 8th grade to do that. So
yeah, how much is a pass?
$50.
$50. Oh,
I think it's up or it's somewhere.
oh, there, I'm sorry. Okay. So,
Pays for itself in like, yes, that's Nick said, 10 minutes. A lot of kids get the pass if it's a good deal.
One thing I just want to add to the discussion, just so the board members know. So the Student Financial Assistance Fund has stepped in when students want to attend a WIAA event because we can't waive the fee. So a good example of that is state football. So like the social workers at the high school worked with the students on the free lunch program and said, who wants to go to the game? And for every student who expressed an interest in wanting to go, the Student Financial Assistance Fund bought the ticket. So the Student Financial Assistance Fund, the goal of that fund is to make sure that any students who want to participate in any activity at the high school that has a fee that we can't waive, that they're able to do it. So I just wanted to make that clear that that fund has been proactive in trying to make sure that if there's something one of our students wants to do, that we can't waive the fee, we would step in and pay for it. So to the best of my knowledge, we have not had a situation where a student on the free lunch program was not able to attend something they wanted to attend. If that happened, it's because they didn't have a conversation with their social worker and say, hey, I really want to go to this event. Because the social workers, one of them at the high school leads that committee. And they're very proactive in trying to get opportunities for kids. And so just so you know, that fund has stepped in to pay for non-Waunakee events like state football where we can't waive the fee.
So you need a motion on? I would make the motion to
Don, do you have any comments or?
I guess I viewed this as a nice to have versus a must have, and it's nice to know what the value is. If at some point we can revisit it, that'd be great. But right now, I think that we have other priorities.
so do we make a motion to reject this?
We don't
Yep.
need anything this time.
Okay.
If you're
I
not
think
thinking
it was,
of
this was just kind of an informational item to see kind of the interest in it, and
Okay,
Yeah, and I think we just need to inform the board at large that we talked about it. But I agree, that's a big chunk. We have other priorities.
Okay, so for the next agenda item, we're just gonna talk, big picture for a minute and get Randy's perspective. So as you know, we originally discussed the possibility of bringing forward resolutions for November of 24 at Randy's last meeting in June. This committee and the board had an opportunity to look at the draft survey results last month. And school perceptions will be attending the June board meeting to share with the board the full packet of the full report. We have talked about the possibility of adding this agenda item to the board retreat in July. I know initially the topic of the board retreat was really going to just be establishing the working relationship between the board and our new superintendent. Both Randy and I have had it, and Allie had a chance to speak with her about the possibility of fitting this in on the night of the board retreat. She's supportive of that idea. If we move ahead with that idea, then we would look to get board feedback on options that evening. And we would bring resolutions forward in August, which is still in plenty of time. So that's a little bit of a different timeline than maybe we originally talked about, but I want Randy to have the chance to share his perspective on that.
I mean, my perspective was, I think our target was to try to get the resolutions done in June. So that then when Dr. Brown came, that was already done and she could focus on kind of some other items. I think when we saw the community survey, even though they were generally positive in many respects, there were some things that I think caused where there's areas that you need more discussion as a board. So I don't think you'll rush that. I think you take your time. You don't have to pass the resolutions till August. So I think you utilize all of that time to do so. In June, so in a couple of weeks, you're going to hear from school perceptions on the final results and kind of what their kind of extrapolation of that data is. I think that's the first step. So, and then the second piece is, as Steve has shared, and I had a conversation with Joan as well, just that she's putting together that agenda for your retreat. Similarly to how the administration did last year, was spending a little bit of time on kind of the fiscal health of the district and kind of what those long range plans were, short term and long term. There's benefit in doing that again. And parallel that done with kind of your results from the survey to kind of put together, what is your strategy? I recommended to Stephen Alley, we kind of move away from talking about like what the ballot question could be right now, because you really don't know what your strategy is. And your ballot language is built off of, that's what your question's gonna be. I think if we start putting the ballot language out too early, it confuses the public on really what our strategy is. So I would recommend just slowing it down. Take the time to hear the survey results in June, do a deeper dive with the board and on the financial aspects of it at the retreat, and then bring those things back through the process in August with them, the feedback that's been provided, then bring the ballot questions so that you can then have a choice. So that's kind of at least kind of process wise and timeline wise, what I think might be wise.
Do you have thoughts about how the strategy can be shared with the public so that they can see that we're thinking about short and long term?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of ways that you can do that, Dawn. I think obviously, even though you have the conversation at the board retreat, I think that when you bring forward the resolutions probably in the August timeframe, and that can be at a regular meeting, that could be if you needed to at a special meeting. That's something that you guys can decide this summer. But I think at that point, you also lay out kind of all the things that you've considered in making the recommendation and the strategy that you have, and then that's part of your communication strategy from that point forward with the community as you talk about the referendum. So I think there's kind of an initial point where you share what that is, but then that's part of the factual communication information that goes out to the community between August and November. Lauren?
Would I support the idea of not rushing the decision. I'm a little bit leery about how much we want to pack into the retreat. And might this be a topic that would be better served at a special meeting, either just before or just after the retreat? Because I could see this being an extended conversation that we have. And I would hate to take away from the other subject matter that the retreat might have.
I think that's a conversation you can have. I guess the point that I would bring is that you need to have the conversation, and it probably doesn't fit into just a regular meeting. The retreat seems like a place we've used it in the past where you can kind of have that kind of broader dialogue about planning for the future, and that fits into it. But that's something I think at the June meeting you can discuss and see how you want to position it.
I would suggest the retreat as well, because it's an overall strategy, and that's what you're talking about, at the retreat is what's the strategy moving forward. And this is part of that strategy. So I would support it as a retreat item, but again, talking about that on the June board meeting to figure out how we do.
But in general, I guess my recommendation would be slow it down, take the time you have in front of you. Really look at what the survey results are, and then really take a look at what the needs of the district are. And then make some decisions on kind of how to structure that referendum for the fall, utilizing kind of both needs of the district and the feedback from the survey.
The retreat, excuse me, the retreat will not be zoomed in to the public, will it?
No.
Okay.
Is a retreat the open meeting?
It's an open meeting, but it's off-site and it's not recorded or something.
And that might
kind of
be another reason why a special meeting might be better option in terms of public availability to see what we're talking about.
But people can attend the retreat. So choose.
Yep.
Okay.
I think that's kind of our thoughts, and that's why I think at this point I would recommend kind of backing away from putting out sample ballot questions. People can run some of those just to see kind of how they could be structured. But until you have a final strategy, I think we kind of hold off from. So I think that can be confusing.
Do we table it until
Yeah, I think the resolution piece, yeah, you can pretty much just say we don't need, I think we're done, there's no action needed. It won't come back until realizing it'll get structured either at a retreat or at some other meeting that we can up for.
Any other discussion? Let's go to Data Wrangler.
So I'll introduce the topic and introduce Jim. So as the board members know, overall, our utility expenditure for our organization has not been a position of strength. We are one of the higher spending districts on utilities in Dane County. The board has reacted to that in a couple of ways. We have invested in a pretty significantly sized solar system for the New Heritage. The New Heritage is a geothermal based school, just like the intermediate school. And the act of having the New Heritage be our school for next fall instead of the existing site in and of itself will significantly change our utilities. The board is also invested in a significant expansion of the solar system at the intermediate school, which is happening this summer. The new middle school is a geothermal based school, and at some point we will get in front of the board a discussion around the solar system at that school. In addition to that, the facility committee has approved a new metering system that will allow data to be collected on utility use in our buildings. One of the things we've heard, especially Jack has brought up in the past before, that we truly have not been assigning the real cost of using our building on the weekends to whether it's the for-profit groups that use our facilities, whether it's the local community nonprofits, or the village programs, whichever programs you want to reference. We truly have not been assigning the real costs of those programs to the use of those buildings. First of all, we don't have the data. Second of all, we'd have to change the policy. But one of the things that's come up this spring is Allie and I have learned of a product that districts have been looking at on the utility side called Data Wrangler. So we're now well positioned with what we've done with the meters to consider a product like this. We're inviting Jim in based on the conversation we had last month. Jim is a resident of Dane County, lives pretty close to us here, and is going to talk through Data Wrangler. We did talk with Jim and say we probably had about 15 minutes. We know we're going to close this meeting by 8:30. So Jim is not going to go through this entire presentation. He's going to focus on the slides that are really the most important from the presentation he provided to the business managers across the state at our conference in May. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Jim, and Rebecca. Jim's going to kind of guide you through the slides to. Oh, perfect. Never mind. Jim's going to slide through it. So, all right, go ahead.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. And that's a great intro because the metering, I think, was already approved, and then we were introduced to Steve and Allie, and we said, hey, in addition to just getting the kilowatt hours from your building, actually you can do a lot with some of the budgetary tools as well as the energy reduction tools. So by putting in a different meter, and then we built software over the last 5 years, and we jumped in here. So a little bit about us. We founded the company right here in Dane County in 2019. We actually were targeting commercial industrial, and we have a lot of private commercial industrial customers. In 2021, we had a school reach out to us and express curiosity about the program. So we tried it at a school and it actually went really well. So we started selling it to schools a lot in Waunakee, Green Bay, and the Cross area. We've started to kind of hone in. We didn't have a salesperson in Dane County. We had salespeople in the other parts of the state. So we're in about 40 public school districts right now. We've saved probably about $5 million to those districts in the first 2 years of using this. And then we just released 2 new products, which we're going to talk a little bit about: the food service electricity reporting and third-party facility usage, i.e. Fund 80 and or facility rental fees and how schools are able to recover that money. I would say on the kind of utility side and solar, we also have solar reporting, and we're doing we have some examples with school districts that we work with where we do solar reporting. Solar is a great way to reduce utility cost, but also, and I used to work for a solar plus storage battery company. Always the best thing before you look at solar or in tandem with on-site generation is efficiency of using the power that you already do. So our product really hones in on, is there energy waste in the buildings and can we resolve that? And a lot of times that's the cheapest way to get at reducing utilities cost is efficiency. And then you layer in that on-site generation, which the district is already doing, which is great. So I'll get into a little bit of detail. So I know Steve wanted me to talk about this today. Historically, and actually my father used to work for Wisconsin Power and Light back in the day. We have the former chairman and CEO of WE Energies on our board for our company. But utilities classically used to bill for consumption, and about, large part of the bill, 90% of the bill was, the power you consume is what you pay for. And I'll use the analogy, food analogy. So imagine now you go to your favorite restaurant, you sit down on a Saturday night at 6 o'clock, you order a steak, you pay for, you eat this, you consume the steak, right? Someone comes back to your table, the waiter comes back and gets your bill for consuming that steak, $50, right? They come back to your table a few minutes later and say, oh, you sat here at 6 o'clock, here's another bill for $50. And you're like, what? Okay. And then they come back to your table and say, oh, by the way, 3 months ago, you brought a party of 10. You had a much higher bill that night. Here's a surcharge for that party of 10. You're gonna have to keep paying that every time you come back on Saturday nights. And you're like, man, I gotta get out of here. And they're like, okay, here's a fuel cost adjustment because it cost us more to make this steak this month than it did last month. So that's how utilities are billing today. And what used to be a very small additional charges, in addition to consumption, over the last couple decades, utilities have really poured more and more charges into these ancillary charges, or demand charges is what they're called. The demand charge is what was the highest peak in the month, and what is also the highest peak in the year. And so they're two separate charges on the bills. And as an example, and this is a bill from a school, and I think this was probably Waunakee on WE Energies. Those demand charges now are actually over 50% of the bill. So for the power or energy you're consuming is less than half in a lot of cases now, and those ancillary charges are over 50% of the bill. Now, the benefit or the potential benefit of that is those demand peaks are set at a certain time, typically monthly or weekly. And if you can understand what's setting those peaks, you can oftentimes reduce those peaks pretty significantly. So in the case here, you can reduce your, you can see this monthly peak demand charge is 14,000 of the bill, which is as much as both energy charges combined. So being able to reduce that for every kilowatt reduced, you're going to save basically about $20 a kW a month. So with the schools we're seeing, typically those can be reduced, sometimes hundreds of kilowatts. So you're talking thousands of dollars a month in savings from having that information and then sharing it with the facility leads, the operators of the facilities, because they don't understand how the utility's billing for power either. And once they do, they're like, oh, this 15-minute peak, yeah, we have that every morning. Our HVAC system starts up. The kids are in the building, the kitchen fires on their dishwashers or whatever. And a lot of times there are strategies to reduce those peaks. And it might even be class scheduling where you've got shop class and home ec, which are causing peaks at a certain time of day, which there are ways to reduce those peaks, but yet not change the fundamental operation of the school. So we've seen schools use this, and typically we see in terms of efficiency savings, 15% bill savings without basically any capital costs. So that's that efficiency piece where you can potentially reduce your utilities, electric utilities across your schools by about 15%. And we've seen that at about 100 school buildings. That's an average number for those school buildings after using the service for a year, making those adjustments.
So what you're saying then, in your example, if I start my ovens at 6 o'clock and the AC at 7 o'clock, that's the strategy.
That would be an example, right? Like where, yeah, it's knowing, what are the big contributors in the building? And then, are they all occurring at the same time? And then, again, we're working with schools to say, okay, controls wise, like if it's an HVAC system, it might be just be changing a control setting and all of a sudden, bam, we've got, 5-10% savings every month. But looking at the data, and that's where our kind of data team will come in, that rate experts as well in terms of utility rates. We will work with the operators because the operators have the understanding of their buildings and what they really can do and cannot do in terms of influencing comfort and other things. And we find those solutions. And they've been very creative in terms of how we're working with different schools. They've come up with some really good ideas. I know some of those ideas were heard at the conference. We had a few of our customers in the meeting actually talking about some of the things the strategies they came up with. But it's all efficiency and it's zero cost items that can help reduce, costs every month. So that combined with a solar program, I think is really going to help your utility costs. Moving ahead though, and this is an example, I want to just show this real quick. So this is kind of a before and after. So here is a school's profile right when we started metering it in orange here. And this is their daily profile. Once we did a lot of different optimizations with them, I think this was about a year later, November 22 to up to November 23. You can see the building envelope. There's a lot of different areas of savings. So one, there's a lot less energy use. You can see the reduced demand peak, it's almost, 75 kW demand peak reduction. They had a lot of waste overnight. You can see there was some issues, but this is probably HVAC and some other things that were resolved. So even that energy waste piece is very significant because you can imagine that's 24/7, 365. Anytime you can find energy waste like that, it's a huge savings. So this was a great example sort of a before and after. And this school is saving, you see at that specific building about $6,000 a month. So it's real money as you add up across your building fleet. And every school's a little different, but a lot of operational things are the same. Right?
Just to be clear, so that's 6,000. That's just an efficiency, that's not reallocating to different funds.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. Yeah. So this was a pretty sizable building. If you're in a high school, this would be pretty typical where a lot of high schools come in at like 30, 40, 50,000 a month in terms of their electricity expense. So that 5,000, that's maybe in that 15 to 20% range. I will also say in the summer months, sometimes there's a lot more flexibility. So sometimes we see some huge numbers on summer savings compared to school month savings. Then as we kind of evolved this with schools, we got to the point where, yeah, you can really grind out a lot of efficiency and, reduce your costs, but schools were going, what else can we do with this data? We actually had some pretty good ideas come across the transom where we were looking at, okay, what if we want to, understand our food service costs? And what if we want to understand third parties using our buildings? So we actually worked with a couple districts and piloted these programs through DPI last fiscal year, and they got MPI approval. So the first one, which I'll just talk briefly about, because I think right now we're not suggesting that for Waunakee, although it could be something that's used in the future, is with our reporting programs, we have ways to isolate and allocate electricity expense in terms of equipment. So this would be a sample sort of report here, where bringing in the utility costs and the run schedules of equipment and as well as measurements, we can build a report that shows the different pieces of equipment in the kitchen and their monthly cost to operate that equipment in terms of electricity expense. Some schools always run or in the situation, especially based on their student population, have an excess in their food service budgets. So they're able to take advantage of this. Also, a lot of schools had excess food service money after COVID. So they're looking to spend that down and, try to get, help that in their general fund. So what this is allowing schools to do, and DPI has approved this method, is to allocate a portion of their electric bills each month to food service. And typically we see food service on average is about 25% of a district's electric bill is related to food service. So as an example, Oconomowoc School District, they were allocating food service expense based on square footage of their kitchen and cafeteria. Is maybe a small, maybe 3% of the building or something. So they were allocating 3% of the electricity costs for food service. And they're paying out of Fund 50. When they put this in, and they were like, I think they found their food service bill was actually 30% of their electric bill. So they were under allocating that by 10x. They actually closed a budget gap because they did have excess Fund 50 of about 300,000 this year in their general fund with that strategy. So again, that's also a strategy some schools are using to get this data if they want to add that into their food service budgets in the future. So they can include and offset some of that if they can do it more efficiently. And again, Allie and her team would be the ones to kind of see if that's something that the district would want to do. But the data is there and it's DPI approved method. The one that I think that, we've talked about in detail and Steve has really said here is a big deal is, third parties using the school facilities. So in concept, when you have a third party using the school facilities, but the school is paying for utilities out of their general fund, should they be funding the third parties using those facilities, or should they be charging them? And what we've seen through the state is, some districts will use funding and they want to understand, okay, if we had an itemized list and every school has a school calendar, whether it's our school today or School Dude, I think you guys use School Dude brightly, right? Yeah. We've integrated with those calendar providers, which then allows us to allocate costs, electric costs, on an event by event basis and provide that spreadsheet back to school business officers. They can then determine how they'd like to potentially recover those costs because, and I know like in this region and Middleton's the same way, there's a lot of third-party for-profit sports companies running around Dane County, turning all my kids into professional athletes, right? But they tend to really gravitate towards public school facilities because they're dirt cheap and they're for-profit, so they're making a lot of money on potentially, and the school's general fund is supporting the facility use. That doesn't seem right to us. So what we've done is said, okay, if you've got an allocated list with your electricity expense on an event by event basis, you can then as a school determine, okay, do we want to add some of this to our levy? Do we want to charge these entities a separate fee? But you can really slice and dice that and recover those costs. So in terms of these sort of, yeah, go ahead.
So can you go down to the room level with this product or is it just at the building?
So the way we do it is, if you're curious, and I won't get into too much detail, but we have a baseline for the building. So when we get the schedule of events, so we can see the offset from that baseline. So for example, on a weekend, we know the baseline when the building is unoccupied, what it uses. But if there's events that are third parties in the building, we will look at that offset and the electricity costs associated with that offset and then allocate it to those events. And if they're overlapping, we just split it equally between those events. But we're able to do this very low cost because it's still with one meter. It's really the software that's doing it. So in terms of the total opportunity, and I think the question earlier was, what's the total savings potential? Now, this is an example. Do we have the Waunakee?
Yeah.
Okay, let me just start here because I think we don't have a food service, but then.
Right, yep.
So this would be pretty typical if a district could use all three programs. Like, let's say we've had this happen a few times. The average sort of recovery. So this district has, high school, junior high, and then 4 elementaries. Pretty typical in terms of their monthly bills. 25,000 for the high school, 15 for the middle school, and then about 5,000 for each elementary school in terms of electric bill per month. So you're saying 60,000 a month electrically, about $750,000 a year. And then of that demand charge component, and this is a real school, I don't remember which one it was, We've anonymized it here. They had 45% of those charges were those demand charges I was talking about, so that's over 300,000, you know, it's a chunk of money going into that demand charge each year. The potential savings on a building by building basis is shown here. So that 15% from that efficiency product and really reducing demand and finding energy waste, it's about a 10,000 a month opportunity. The Fund 50, if they're able to allocate, and they've got budget excess in their food service, that's about 25% on average we've seen. So that's about a 15,000 a month opportunity in terms of what we would say redirecting those funds, but you're preserving that money in the general fund then. And then the third party facility events, we've seen this all over the map, anywhere from 5 to 30% at a building, just based on what groups are using it and how that building is used. That typically we see coming in about 15% as well in terms of matching that efficiency piece. And those are funds that can be recovered, whether it's through a Fund 80 levy, whether it's through rental fees or a combination of the two. So in general, the takeaway is if you can use all three of these programs, you can basically preserve over half that money per month in your school general fund using those strategies. And you can see in here the gross yearly savings potential of about 400,000 for that particular district. And then again, over a 5-year period for that would be a $2 million opportunity over a 5-year. So I think let's pull up the Waunakee data. So we have the spreadsheet built for the Waunakee district.
While Ally's getting that ready, I know we have to be done in a couple of minutes, so we'll table the last agenda item, which was our report on how our natural gas purchase. We're not recommending locking in or doing anything right now anyways, since we're in the summer months, so we'll bring that back to July. And we'll have Jim kind of share the Waunakee spreadsheet, and then I know we have to kind of close the meeting, so we'll wrap it up here in just a moment.
I can keep it quick here, but I'm sure you guys want to see the numbers. So yeah, so you can see Waunakee kind of falls right into that high school typical electric bill, that 20 to 25,000 number. The intermediates at 10,000, both middle schools roughly 10,000. The new heritage school, that's an estimate. We don't have that actual data yet, but we just estimate 10,000. And then the elementaries you can see are in that $5,000 to $7,000 range monthly. Again, the demand charge is fairly high, 40% of the bill, so significant chunk, and that's over 300,000. Again, actually, this example is pretty close to that example school we had, that district. So we see similar in terms of the energy reduction piece, about 10 grand a month of savings. Right now, 50 is not applicable. However, with the physical metering we're putting in, if the district, you guys ever wanted to explore that, and Ally and I have already had a few discussions about it, you would be able to potentially turn that on as a report to be able to use that strategy in the future. So it's kind of future proof, which is great, you know, as a budgetary tool or something you might use later. And then that third party facility event, again, we see about a $10,000 monthly opportunity. So in terms of the potential general fund savings with the reduce the bills and then recover that money, you know, you're looking at over about a $250,000 opportunity annually with the district. We've also put our fees in here for the funds. So we were able to do outage notifications for the staff, because I know that was the original thing that went into this. The great thing about the metering we actually put in, it was quite a bit cheaper than the Schneider electric meters. So instead of having just 6 meters on the mains, we've got a meter on the main, but we've also got a meter on the generator. So when Mike or John, the building goes down, they'll be able to see not only is the building down, but did the generator come up? So if there's a school where the generator didn't come up, or the district office, if you get a generator here, they know where to go first in terms of making sure that generator comes up and the power is on. So that was some additional add. But in terms of that monthly report and working on the energy efficiency side, for all the buildings, you can see it's $2,500 a month. So you're still taking home 75% or more of the savings. every month. And then those Fund 80 reports again are low, so there's a lot of leverage on that Fund 80 reporting. We also will have the ability to report solar out with this. And we do it very accurately in terms of exact bill savings from the solar every month and report back on that. We're doing that for some schools today. So then your monthly fees would be here. The monthly net general fund savings after those fees is still, you're still looking at almost $200,000 of savings over the course of the year in the general fund.
New teachers.
I know Oconomowoc used it for, I think that their savings this year for 4 or 5 teachers, I believe. Any questions? I know I'm up against time. Yeah.
There were I realize the schools that aren't there yet were estimated, but were the rest of if you slide it to the left for the demand charges, were those coming off of our actual district invoices?
Yes, they were. Yep. And I think we did a little bit of an average on that. We had a 1 month that we looked at, and then we kind of averaged that across, but that we did look at that, and that is a pretty common at 40%.
Just for the board members, some of the things that you would need to think about. Obviously, the system has the capability to do multiple things. One of them is the data that's provided so that we can try to monitor and capture that 15% savings kind of on the peak demand. The Fund 80 is really a conversation that the board would need to have. Do you want to levy in Fund 80 for those utility costs, which is a path that is absolutely okay. The DPI has approved that, working with Jim's product. B, do you want to allocate those expenses off to the groups? Or C, a combination? So as an example, the board could say the for-profit groups are going to pay their freight for using these facilities. The board could say a Waunakee Wave who is using the pool could pay some of the fees of the pool for utilities, or the board could say there's a community value in a group like that and we're going to add it to the levy. What this product does is it gives the board the ability to make those type of decisions that in the past we haven't been able to do. I think the thing that we would focus on first is the 15% capturing those savings in our Fund 10 and that energy waste or those strategies during the day to get our demand charges down. You saw the chart where there was that real school example where you saw the before and the after. That would be our focus. And then we would definitely need to work with the policy committee and the board on what approach do you want to take as a board related to Fund 80. I know, Jack, you brought up as an example that like the Village of Waunakee basketball program uses the middle school almost all day, almost every Saturday, for the whole winter, and there's no fee. But this product is going to actually tell you as a board that's costing your general fund X every Saturday. And so if we were to purchase that tool, you would then know what that information is. So as a board, you would have to weigh, is that information that you want? And if it is information that you want, what would you do with that information? Now, that's not a decision for today. The question that we're posing today is, do you want to bring this back to the next budget committee meeting to continue exploring it? Do you know enough about this product that you'd like to see parts of it in place by July 1st? Just trying to get an initial reaction as to, where you want us to go with a product like this. We absolutely can add it to the July agenda if you want more time to think about it and talk about it. If you feel that there's parts of this that you want to move ahead with, so we can start with the data and be ready to go, we can do that as well. So we're just looking to see from the 3 board members and wrap up the meeting. Do you have any thoughts on where you want to go with this?
Mark?
Question I had, how soon, once this is installed, could we expect to see some savings, at least on the demand part of it?
Yeah, great question. So I think there is, at least for summer, is always a good time for us to get this in. So as soon as the meters are in and after day one, we can immediately start working with the operations group on identifying energy waste, understanding demand. And a lot of times that first month, we can start to at least see obvious stuff and start working on it. And our process is we meet monthly with the team. So I think in terms of the board, what's our sense of urgency? Summer is a good time, and usually, not always, the facility team might be a little less distracted with not having kids in the building. So it's a tool they would be able to use pretty effectively in the summer. We've seen that some schools, they can try different things. They might not be comfortable trying when school kids are in the building. But we've seen schools make some serious hay in the summer and then understanding their buildings better at the same time.
So if we approve this, can we just approve the efficiency, get a couple of line items? Well,
Yep, absolutely.
So is it 20, if we just want to go after the efficiency?
Yep,
Is it $2,500 a month?
correct. And that would be all that were installed.
And what Jack is saying would then give the board time to have that deeper discussion about funding. You know, do you want that data? And if you do want that data, what are you gonna do with it? Do you want to charge groups differently? Do you want to levy for it? I mean, I think that's probably gonna take at least a policy committee meeting to talk through that, because that's a pretty big change.
So
Personally, I'm more interested in actually reducing the energy use versus shifting costs around. I mean, it's certainly something we can do, and we can talk about changing our fee structures, but actual energy reductions are what we should be looking at. To be clear, the purple column, that's an actual energy reduction based on changes in practices, right? The 15%.
Correct. That's right.
Is it possible, the spreadsheet that has all the yearly demand shared charges, is that a spreadsheet you have, Steve? The raw data?
We do, yeah, North American Mechanical collects all of our utility expenses on a monthly basis and does give us an annual report. And so we have a lot of information about this that we absolutely could share with the committee at the next meeting.
is this,
Can you send the spreadsheet? I'm kind of a spreadsheet junkie, and I like to play with it myself
Sure.
rather than looking at a report out. I appreciate the report out, but I like to make sure the math is mathing.
Yep, absolutely.
Cool.
is complementary to North America, what North America does, something different than what they do?
It's definitely different than what they do. Yep. So again, we're happy to bring this back in July for further discussion. We know we're running out of time today, or if you wanted to move just the component forward with the $2,500 to get that set up for the summer, which is the actual 15% piece, we could do that. Depending on whatever you
So
prefer.
your recommendation would be then to go take that to the full board, is that right?
No,
So that would give you time to get the spreadsheet to Dawn for her to review.
I'm comfortable because it appears to be actual savings of energy to go with that minimal proposal. But then when we bring it back, if we're going to bring it back, then I'd also like to see what it would cost us to analyze the food service part of it as well. If we're gonna look at the one, we may as well look at the other, and so we would have the time to make that decision.
I would make the motion to go with the minimal to start with, and as Mark indicated, bring it back to discuss food service.
I second that.
All in favor?
No.
Aye.
No.
Got it.
This will go to the board in June with the recommendation you just made. And Dawn will get off that spreadsheet to you, and then if there's any questions we have, we'll be able to answer those either beforehand or at the meeting.
Why don't you send that to the
All
whole
of
committee?
it. Yep, perfect. Sounds good.
Okay, we're tabling the natural gas.
Yep.
We'll bring that back. And the last item of business is adjourned.
Yeah, motion to adjourn.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thanks, Dawn. We'll see you.